Let's talk about how to use the battery block spreadsheet to determine what battery you're going to build. So, first of all, you can only enter information into the colored cells. So let's start with this. This column, the yellow, represents your cell. If you have a cell, you enter the information here. But in column D, I've entered the information for a Samsung 2600 milliamp hour cell, which BatteryBlocs sells, and also the venerable Panasonic 3400 milliamp hour cell, which BatteryBlocs sells. So let's start with figuring out how to calculate the voltage of your battery. You know that you want to build, let's say, a 36 volt battery. So you need to know, you need to wire a certain number of cells in series to achieve that. So let's take this number. We have 10 cells wired in series. That gives us 36 volts nominal. Maybe that's it, but what if we had 11 cells wired in series? That would give us 39 volts nominal. That's a little bit too much. Let's go back to 10 cells wired in series. There we are. And so what you do is change this number to match the number of cells you want to, the voltage that you want. If you want, say, a 24 volt battery, this might be 5. Nope, not quite. Let's go to 6 cells wired in series. Close. Let's go to 7 cells wired in series. 25 volt battery, 29 volts, fully charged. So you'd use the 7 cells in series battery if you wanted to have a 25 volt battery. This first number refers to the nominal volts. This is sort of like the manufacturer's rating on their cells. The second number refers to the maximum volts. This is what your battery voltage will be at when it's fully charged. This is important to know because you want to be sure you don't exceed the voltage rating of your components. Let's take, for example, the Bafang motor. The Bafang motor is rated, the controller is rated for no more than 60 volts. So if we make a 14S battery, we can see we're at 58 volts. That's pretty close to what it's rated at. You shouldn't go much higher than that, but if you wanted to, you go to 15 cells wired in series. You see the voltage goes over to 63, so you would have to go back down to 14 to stay within the manufacturer's ratings for the equipment. Okay, so this also, of course, tells you the charging voltage that you're going to need. Your charger needs to be charging at this voltage to give it a full charge. Let's go back to this. And we're now back to the 36 volt battery. And let's say that we want to build a battery that has about 750 watt hours. Let's start with the 4-pack. This wires 4 cells in parallel together. You see this drop-down menu here? There's 4 numbers, 4, 6, 8, and 10. These are the 4 different sizes that the battery blocks come in. So let's start with the smallest one. Again, these are 2.6 milliamp hour cells, and we have a battery now that's got 10 amp hours and 374 watt hours. Well, that isn't quite what we needed. We wanted more. If we go and change the voltage, yes, we will get more watt hours, but the voltage will be too high. So we need to keep the voltage where it's at and instead increase the number of cells wired in parallel or the size of the battery blocks, same thing. So let's try a 6-pack now. A 6-pack gives us 562 watt hours. Good, we're getting there. Let's try an 8-pack. An 8-pack gives us 749 watt hours. There we are, that's just where we want it to be. Cool. So we have now a battery with 21 amp hours and 749 watt hours. But let's go over here and take a look at this Panasonic. What if we built the battery using this Panasonic cell instead of the Samsung cell? Let's compare them. Well, here's the 10 cells wired in series. Again, this needs to stay the same as the other one because if we change it, we'd be over the voltage that we want to be at. Let's start with 4 cells wired in series. 4 cells wired in parallel here. It's a 4P battery block. These are 3.4 amp hour cells instead of the 2.6. So even with the 4-pack, we're at 14 amp hours and 500 watt hours. Not quite enough. Let's go up to the 6-pack. The 6-pack gives us 734 watt-hours. Well, that's pretty close. Maybe we'll stick with that. Let's go down and look at the numbers now. So the Samsung coming down here sells for $3 a cell. So the total cost for the cells is $240. And the total cost for the battery blocks is $99.50. So you have a total of $339.50 for the cells and the battery blocks. That's what I call the bare battery, because it's the cost of the bare battery. Coming over here to Panasonic, these cells cost more. $4 instead of $3. So this might be more expensive. But it's not. They're exactly the same cost. Why is that? It's because this uses less cells. Down here, the Panasonic built battery is only using 60 cells, but the Samsung is using 80 to achieve roughly the same number of watt-hours. But the cost of the battery blocks is a bit less because we're using a 6-pack instead of an 8-pack. So the cost is $80 instead of roughly $100, and we have a $20 savings in the battery. The analysis shows that the cost per watt-hour for the Panasonic is also slightly cheaper than the cost of the Samsung, and the Panasonic battery would be a lighter battery because we're using 60 cells instead of 80. So given all that, this would probably be the choice you'd want to make. Let's go back over here. Let's take a look at your cell. And let's assume that you have a cell that you have a bunch of, and they're 2,000 milliamp hours or 2 amp hours. Okay, let's stick with the 36-volt battery just to compare. So again, we'll leave this at 10 cells wired in series, or 10 battery blocks wired in series. We only have 16 amp. We have an 8. Let's start with the, let's go right up to the 10 because this is a smaller cell size, smaller cell capacity. So if we go with a 10-pack, we will have 720 watt-hours. Okay, so with the Panasonic at 3.4 milliamp hours per cell, we only need a 6-pack. With the Samsung at 2600, we need an 8-pack. And with this cell, which only has 2 milliamp hours, we need to have a 10-pack. And we reach roughly the same battery watt-hours building them these 3 different ways. The cost of this, of course, there's no cost for the cells because the premise was that you already own the cells. And so the cost of the battery blocks is $129.50. It's higher than these because we're using 10 packs, not 8 packs or 6 packs. So the number of battery blocks you would need would be 10. The size of the battery blocks would be the 10 packs, and you need to be sure that you've got 100 of these 18650 cells to work with. Let me show you one other thing. A couple of things actually. Let's go ahead and build the battery that I rode around the country on. Let's take this Panasonic and let's switch it to 14 and it'll come up to 58 volts. I used the Bafang motor, which is rated up to 60 volts, so that worked for me. Let's make it 10 packs. We just want to carry as much power as we can. And now we've got a battery of 1,714 watt-hours or 1.7 kilowatt-hours. That's a pretty substantial battery. The cost works out to about $750. However, if you want to go twice as far as this, essentially if you want to ride all day on your electric bike or power your piece of equipment for a long period of time, you can double the number of cells that you have wired in parallel. For example, here's 10 cells wired in parallel. Double it, double this number, and what that does is now you've got 2 of these 10 packs wired in parallel for 20 cells wired in parallel. This, of course, doubles the size of the battery, and now you have a 3.4 kilowatt-hour battery and a total bare battery cost of $1,482. You can also, let's go back to the 36-volt battery here for a second, and you can also take one of these 10 packs and split it in 2 and make 2 5-packs living within the same battery block. In that case, we would split this in half and make it 0.5, which means this 10 is divided into 2 groups of 5 cells. This would give us a 612 watt-hour battery at the total cost of $264.75 to be a very compact battery of only 50 cells. I do have a video that shows how to split a 10-pack, and I think that's about it. I know this is very confusing. I've gone over it quickly. If you need help configuring your battery and want to know what the The best thing for what you're trying to do is be sure and use my contact form and give me a shout. Put your phone number on if it's complicated so we can talk on the phone. Thanks for your attention.